Hi, I'm Mark Basilio from Crossroads Community Church, and welcome to The Truth in 10, where we try to share some scriptural truths with you in about 10 minutes, give or take. And again, we'd really like it if you would subscribe to our channel and like our videos so we can keep the ministry going, and we know that some people will be hearing it. One of the reasons why good news is because it refutes bad news, right? I just got a clean bill of health for my cancer. My PSA results were great. My brother just got out of the hospital. I just got out of debt. Those are all examples of good news. But if somebody says, hey, I just got home from work. Here's a Tic Tac. Right, you're like, I don't think you're using that word correctly. Because that's not really good news. That's just kind of normal, everyday news. So when we say, what is the good news to a Christian? Hopefully, I would really hope that they would say, duh. But unfortunately, as we can see the way the church is going now, that's not the case, right? We have this epidemic of only focusing on the love of God. God is love. God is the great grandfather in the sky. Here's a butterscotch, go play, right? That's how we're perceiving who God is. And we also then judge ourselves. It's like, well, I do more good than I do bad, so I'm not a bad person. So, why do I need the good news? Why do I have to worry about hell? And everyone suffers from what we'd call a confirmation bias. And that is that we measure everything by the standard that we set up. Like, I think you're crazy if you like candy corn, right? And there'll be other people on the other side who think you'd be crazy if you didn't like candy corn. And people say, but I'm not that bad, right? I do good things. I'm a good person. I don't kick puppies. I give monies to charity. I deserve to go to heaven. That's not the good news, right? That is not the good news. We don't become transformed. We don't become new creations. We don't become new creatures. That's not just a promotion that we're getting as in our lifestyle or what's going to happen to us in the afterlife as a promotion. We become new creatures redeemed by God. So when we're confronted with something like Romans 3:23, it says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Most people don't go into denial, but what they will do is they'll throw out their confirmation bias and say, well, sure, I've sinned, but I didn't sin as bad as that other person, right? I'm not a mass murderer. I don't cheat on my taxes, right? And sure, I'm fallen, but I haven't fallen that far. I'm a good person, right? Why do I need good news? But the problem is we need to make sure that we look at the entirety of scriptures. And we're always training our folks, look at the scriptures before it, look at the scriptures after it to get the entire context of what we're talking about. And in Romans, the first two chapters, Paul pretty much berates the Jews, and then he goes and berates the Gentiles. And then in the third chapter, he says, yeah, I'm berating you all. You are all sinners, right? You all deserve what it says in Romans, that the wages of sin is death. If we don't read the entire chapter, we're in trouble. So let's look at some of the verses there from chapter 3. It says in Romans 3:9, what then? Are we better? Not at all. For we have already charged that both Jews and Greeks are all under sin. As it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. So when we start comparing ourselves to ourselves, right, we fall short. Paul says, everyone is under sin. That's the problem. It's not whether we're better than somebody else. It's not how often we sin. It's not how badly we sin. It's the fact that we're all in sin. And in Romans 6, it says, for the wages of sin is death. So how many sins does it take to have a wage of death? Well, God is a very nice employer that way because it only takes one. And matter of fact, it doesn't even take one because we were born with that nature, which is why we need to become a new creation, a new creature. It's not good enough to have that promoted idea. We need to make sure that God is transforming us, that we're justified through his blood. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks for God. Well, how do we become and good? How do we get to heaven if we don't even seek after where God lives? But in Romans 2:5, but because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. So it's not you're just going to be promoted if you're getting demoted. You're going to be under the wrath of God, right? Not just some neutral thing that's going to happen to you. Well, God will put me in the less nice part of heaven. No, you're under the wrath of God if you don't let God transform you. But those, in Romans 2:8, but those who are selfishly ambitious and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, wrath, and anger. Again, this is just not something that this might be mentioned a couple times in the scriptures. No, if we do not come before Christ as a redeemed person, redeemed by his blood and by his sacrifice, we are those objects of wrath. And in Ephesians 2:3, among whom all of us formerly conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. The good news is that we are saved from that wrath. That's what the good news is. The good news pushes out the bad news. The bad news is that we were those enemies of God, that we needed desperately to have God, to have the blood of Christ wash us clean. Not to promote us, not to make us better people, not to make us sin less, but that we could be redeemed. For all have turned aside, together have become worthless. There is no one who does good. There is not even one. And you think you do more good than do bad? Look what it says in Isaiah 64. It says, for all of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous deeds are like a filthy garment. So you think you're doing good? You're not doing good. Compared to God's standards, your good works are filthy rags. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they keep deceiving. The poisons of asp is under their lips, whose mouth are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are their paths, and the path of peace they have not known. He's not talking about axe murderers. He's not talking about war criminals. He's not talking about children or parents who beat their children. He's talking about us, every one of us. This applies to us. This is why we need to become the new creature that Christ has promised through his death and resurrection. And again, it's not a promotion. And there is no fear of God before their eyes. They've talked about this in the Old Testament. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of knowledge. Well, where are we going to get knowledge from if we do not fear God, and the fear of God is the beginning of that? Ignorant fools despise wisdom and discipline. And in Proverbs 14, the fear of the Lord is the fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. If you don't know God, and truly, truly know God, if you don't know what God has done for you, if you don't know what Jesus has done for you, if you don't believe in his death and resurrection, you are condemned. You are an object of wrath. So understand, the good news is not about being better than you were. The good news is not self-improvement. The good news is not self-help. It's not a promotion. It's not a course correction. Yeah, I was doing some wrong things and Jesus came into my life and now I'm doing different things. No, that's not being a Christian. It's about something that I am not and could never be without the salvation of Christ and his amazing grace. it boils down to that. It's nothing that we can do on our own. It's all Christ. It's becoming that new creature. It's no longer being an object of wrath in God's eyes, but being one of his children, saved and redeemed. And it's going from death to life. And that's the important part. That is the good news, that Jesus has come to save us, to bring us from the reign of death into the reign of life. Well, we thanks for listening. And again, please like and subscribe, and have a good day.